On Saturday, a report by the independent think tank British Future revealed that there has been a significant shift in public opinion regarding the United Kingdom's relationship with the European Union. The survey found that 52% of Britons now want a closer relationship with the EU, while only 12% support a more distant relationship. And this marks a notable departure from the sentiment that prevailed during the 2016 Brexit referendum, when 52% of the UK voted to leave the EU, and I mean the voters of the day. The report's findings suggest that public perception of Brexit has soared in the years since the UK's departure. And not so soured. The economic impact of Brexit has been a major factor in the shift, with businesses and individuals facing increased costs and trade barriers. Additionally, the UK's position in the world has been weakened due to its more isolation from the EU. And the survey also found that there is strong support for closer cooperation with the EU in various areas, including trade, science and research, crime and terrorism, customs arrangements, and international health. This suggests that the public is recognizing the benefits of maintaining close ties with the EU despite the challenges of Brexit. The findings of the British Future report have been met with mixed reactions from politicians and commentators, though. Some have welcomed the shift in public opinion as an opportunity to reassess the UK's relationship with the EU, while others have cautioned against moving too quickly towards a closer relationship. It remains to be seen how the UK will navigate its relationship with the EU in the years to come. The current government is still committed to the Northern Ireland Protocol, which keeps Northern Ireland aligned with the EU's single market and the customs union. However, there is growing support, as I said, for a closer relationship with the EU among the public and some politicians. The report by British Future highlights the complex and evolving nature of the public opinion on Brexit. While the UK has officially left the EU, the debate over the UK's relationship with the Union is likely to continue for many years to come. The godfather of Brexit is also unhappy with the consequences. And now 3 giants in the automotive industry are threatening to stop production in Great Britain. Well, it couldn't be more strange here. Of all people, Nigel Farage, who did more than anyone else to bring about Brexit, has now made a devastating verdict on the consequences of Britain's exit from the EU. The longtime EU opponent and former leader of the UKIP Independence Party has come to the conclusion that his country did not really benefit from Brexit, economically speaking. Brexit has failed. I talked about this, of course, that he said that. But it doesn't mean that it would have been better to stay in the European Union at the time, in his opinion. For him, there is absolutely nothing wrong with the principle that he so vehemently advocated. And he simply blames the failure of the project on the Tory government, which handled everything miserably, and their politicians were just as useless as the commissioners in Brussels. I know you've heard that before, but I think that fits very well into this video. And instead of stimulating the British economy with the help of Brexit, hopeless government policies have, on the contrary, driven many companies out of the country. And the situation at the borders has not improved when it comes to the record influx of foreigners, this time from outside the EU. And he believes that the Tories have really let them down and completely disappointed them. In fact, the mood has changed significantly since the 2019 general election, in which Boris Johnson vowed to finally get Brexit done. Like Farage, most of his compatriots are increasingly concerned about the negative consequences that Britain's departure from the EU has had. The views of Brexiteers on the success or failure of Brexit have indeed evolved over time. In the immediate aftermath of the vote to leave the EU in 2016, there was a strong sense of optimism among many Brexiteers who believed that the UK would be better off outside the EU. However, as the negotiations between the EU and the UK progressed, and as the full implications of Brexit began to become apparent, this optimism began to fade, at least in some. In recent years, there has been a growing sense of regret among many Brexiteers. A 2023 YouGov poll found that 53% of Britons now believe that the UK was wrong to leave the EU, while only 32% believe it was the right decision. And this sentiment has been driven by a number of factors, including the economic impact of Brexit, the disruption to trade and travel, and the loss of EU citizenship for British citizens. Despite this growing sense of regret, there are still some Brexiteers like Farage who remain committed to their belief that the UK is better off outside the EU. They argue that the UK is now free to control its own laws and borders, and that it can forge new trade deals with other countries around the world. Yeah, we saw how that worked. And they also point to the fact that the UK has not experienced the economic collapse that some had predicted. However, it is clear that the mood among Brexiteers has shifted. The early optimism has been replaced by a more cautious and realistic assessment of the situation. Many Brexiteers now acknowledge that there have been some negative consequences of Brexit, but they still believe that in the long run, the UK will be better off outside the EU, so they will have to be taught by time. There are some key points I started to mention that Brexiteers may raise in their defense of Brexit. That the UK is now free to control its own laws and borders are already set, and this is a key argument for many Brexiteers who believe that the EU was too intrusive in UK affairs, and they point to the fact that the UK can now make its own decisions on issues such as immigration, trade, and environmental regulations, and that the UK can forge new trade deals with other countries around the world. That was another key argument for Brexiteers who believe that the EU's trade deals were not in the best interests of the UK. Yeah, now compare the two. But they argue that the UK can now strike new trade deals that are more beneficial to British businesses and consumers. But that didn't happen so far. And they say that the UK is now a sovereign nation. Well, this is more a symbolic argument for Brexiteers who believe that the UK should be independent of any other country. They argue that the UK is now free to chart its own course in the world. Yeah, as a tiny ship there. It's important to note that these are just some of the arguments that Brexiteers may raise, and there are many other factors that may influence their views, such as their political beliefs, their economic interests, and their personal experiences. Jacob Rees-Mogg and his finances will not be one of them at the moment, I guess. However, these arguments have been challenged by those who believe that Brexit will have a negative impact on the UK. These critics argue that Brexit will burden the economy because the economy is heavily integrated with the EU, or was, and Brexit is likely to lead to increased costs, supply chain disruptions, and job losses, as we saw. And Brexit will weaken the UK's position on the global stage and make it more difficult to cooperate with its partners in Europe and around the world. The debate over Brexit has been deeply divisive in British society, and it will continue to polarize opinion for many years to come. Only time will tell whether Brexit will ultimately be a minor failure or a big one, but the full impact of Brexit is still unfolding, and it's too early to say with certainty what the long-term consequences will be. However, the growing sense of disillusionment among many Brexiteers suggests that the UK is facing a challenging period ahead. And if you want to get some rest from politics, you might have seen my banner up there in recent videos. That new channel is doing so well in this short of time that it's already existing. If you are interested in Star Trek, you might want to visit me there and get away from all politics. And if you still want to see some politics right now, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.